we get into the video, quick announcement. I'm holding the live stream December 21st during the gifting event. During that live stream, I'm going to be giving away multiple greater gifting crystals. So be sure you don't want to miss it. Be sure to subscribe and click on yes on turning on the notifications, or you may miss it. Like I said, be multiple greater gifting given out then. With that notification announcement being said, let's get into the good stuff. So what I have here for you now is going to be multiple fights, several fights in the 20s in the new event quest Cavalier difficulty for 3.1 for the Spider-Ham event quest December 2020. So I am showing how Doctor Voodoo completely cheeses almost all of the fights in this 3.1. Some of you, for those of you who've been watching my monthly EQ item free walkthroughs, may have noticed past couple months I've been primarily relying on Doctor Voodoo, at least on my completion walkthroughs. And so I decided to show just how much Doctor Voodoo cheese. In my opinion, Doctor Voodoo is the best overall for the new Cavalier mode EQ for these new Mystic nodes they have. That's my opinion. If for most fights, there are a few exceptions. You're going to notice all of these 20 plus fights are going to be against non-poison immune because frankly the most effective. On the poison immune ones, I'm generally using Doctor Doom, which is a small percentage of the fights. Or Claire works as well. For every other fight, we'll see even in the mini bosses in here, we'll see Doctor Voodoo being used. So the main thing that makes Doctor Voodoo so amazingly good for these fights is the way the buffs are set up, the way the nodes are set up. If I stay close, you're seeing those furies get really high. All I got to do at that point is convert them with an S1 on even account. Turns it really high. I'm already at 38 poisons rather quickly into the fight. Meanwhile, while I'm converting that, I'm gaining prowess. So now my specials are gaining much higher level ability as well. Additionally, I got power control. So most of these fights you'll see I start off as an S2. That way I can control the power. I'll take plenty of block damage and parry damage. I don't care because I got free regeneration for a good amount of time at the beginning of every single fight. I will then try to stay nice and close. I try to stay up there as much as possible in most fights. Some fights, like this one, will be a little bit different. Got to be somewhat careful, and there I took a little accidental hit, which I don't sweat too much with Doctor Voodoo, as I'll get this back rather easily at the beginning of next fight. So my strategy in all these fights is mostly almost identical. Start off the fight with an S2, staying close. I'm purposely building up his furies that they get from these nodes. I then, after get the S2, get the power control, staying on even count. I then go ahead and launch S1s, once again staying close. I'll also do a lot of hitting into the block. I'll stay as close as I can as often as possible, building up those furies so I can burn him. Because the more furies he has, the more poisons he's going to have when I launch that S1. So I want them to get a lot of buffs. And you see now, I got 32 poisons. You'll see poison damage ticking all over the place. There are thousands upon, well over 5,000 going off there for a little bit. Damage per tick. That's a good, what, 10,000 damage per second, give or take. And you see just absolutely melted that Infinity War with very little effort, as most of these fights you're going to see with very little effort. I'm not going to say you're not going to see a few little mistakes, but that's what I like about Doctor Voodoo. I don't really sit there and stress out about trying to do perfect fights because I get so much regeneration with my Max Sig Doctor Voodoo beginning of every fight. So main reason I wanted to showcase Doctor Voodoo here is one, he is like the ultimate cheese for Cavalier 3-1 in my personal opinion, and it's going to stay this way until I see something that changes my mind. He is the best, ultimately best Mystic for these 3.1 EQ, the Mystic buff, new Cavalier difficulty overall. So there are a few fights I won't use him on, but I'd say probably 90% of the fights in the Mystic buff, he is, in my opinion, the best fit for them. I've seen many people talking about Dr. Voodoo's outdated, he's not good for current game meta, and blah, 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 blah. So I'm assuming those people haven't watched my last couple months. We see I'm doing about 10,000 per tick right now for a little bit with those 42 points. That's like, what, 20,000 damage per second. So I'm assuming those people haven't watched my last few months Cavalier EQ walkthrough. So I decided to do a nice little highlight. Not only does Doctor Voodoo completely cheese through this and such an amazing option for these fights in Cavalier EQ, but is more than still comp comparable for these and competent for these newer game meta. I said the fact that he can not just nullify but convert these buffs into poisons is huge. And so we'll see these fights, and you're going to see a lot of fights. Pretty much all the non-poison immune fights for 3.1 is going to be in this video. The only exception will be the main exception will be the path fights. For the one path I did in my walkthrough, I have a Chapter 3 walkthrough for this month's Cavalier difficulty EQ already up. Put it up last week, along with Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 as well, of course. So the path that I did for that video will not be in this video because I already posted those fights. No point in double doing the same thing. So if you want to see the rest of the fights, just tune into that video. Otherwise, pretty much everything else, including the minis and the boss, will be in this video, all solos. So we see the 34 poisons going on. There are lots of damage kicking in. See how easy it is. You see all those ticks. I mean, there's so many red numbers ticking everywhere. Just watch those red numbers on these fights. That's what it was, 15,000 per second, give or take. Melting them off. From what I've seen, Dr. Doom and Claire can't do that. It's the ultimate cheese for these kind of fights. And not just these Cavalier EQ, but any of these fights where the champs get heavy buffs. So that could include people like Venom, who is buff heavy naturally, or a lot of these nodes that give the champs. And I can control how many buffs they're getting in this fight by staying close. See, I made a little mistake on that S1 right there. Silly mistake. Usually don't. It's pretty much almost the exact same timing as Storm XS1, but there we go. A silly mistake the first time, but again, another thing that I love about Doctor Voodoo is that he is forgiving. I can make those mistakes, and it's not going to overly destroy me. Although my health is a little bit low, as long as I don't do anything stupid, I should be fine. This is not the funnest fight, but I am trying to make it simpler by baiting the ones that I can bait easily, except for the fact you bait easily, except for the fact of that first little mishap. So I'm mainly sticking with that S1. Got a little cut off guard the first part. So now I'm getting these poisons up. So we saw the fight start off a little slow. Now we're seeing it's pretty much melting away as I am continuously trying to get those poisons built up. Once I get them stacked up a little bit, fight becomes ridiculously easy. I've also got my 10 prowess, so my specials are doing some silly damage too. And boom, melted him down. Start off a little bad, but no biggie. So now we're going to go into this hella fight. Let's be on a different path. You're going to see these fights coming in kind of in order on path based on the way I go. I do save the Scarlet Witch, the new Scarlet Witch, the boss fight, for the end of this video. But other than that, I'm showing all the different paths and showing why it's not just a little niche, not just a little couple fights or one path, how he just cheeses so many of those fights. You saw that I've only got 3 prowess already doing pretty strong special damage right there. Again, sticking up in there close, purposely building up their Furies. The negative part about building up those Furies and staying close is I'm going to take some block damage, that's fine. Otherwise, trying to bait back and forth, I'm not going to be able to build up those Furies. So I'm going to stay close, take some block and parry damage, no biggie, knowing I'm going to recover it in the next fight. Already melting through, didn't even get my poison super high in this fight, and still melted through the fight. You're going to notice most of these fights, even though they have 200, between like 200 to 300 health in each of these fights, most of them last about a minute to a minute and a half, with a couple of exceptions, which overall is pretty good for that kind of health, especially for someone who people consider outdated with the game's current meta. Keep in mind, they've been using these same basic nodes every month EQ or similar, so this Doctor Voodoo is pretty much an automatic cheese on Cavalier EQ Mystic buffs until further notice, until they decide to change it. Not to mention, he's my go-to, at least in my top two go-tos, along with Venom the Duck, for AQ as well, just because of his forgiving nature and what he can do. People will say he hits soft, and they're right, although you do see some decent damage on some of those hits. You're seeing 2 and 3,000 crit hits, which ain't great, but not terrible. But look at this damage just on these fights. Watch those red numbers. Even on fights where I don't get the poison super high, 10, 15 is still melting off. On the ones I'm getting to the 20s, 30s, even 40s, I mean, it's ridiculous how quick the damage melts off. I did a video not too long ago of Doctor Voodoo doing 850,000 damage off of one S1. You know what people's counter argument is? Well, take off the poison damage, it's less. Well, duh. Take off the bleed damage of Fury and say he still does a lot of damage. It's a silly statement. Alright. If they have a strength, you can't just reduce it to strength in your own argument. Every champ has their abilities, have areas where they shine, have areas where they don't shine as much. People ask who's the best mystic, Doom or Claire. It's always between those two, and for the most part, that's fair enough. It depends. Doom without suicides is awesome. With suicides, I would take Claire over that. But then let's throw Doctor Voodoo into this. I'm not saying, before I get all these hate mails, I'm not saying he's the best mystic, but I am saying he is better than them for some content. I do believe overall for this specific content, right, I'm doing right now, he is better because he inflicts so much damage from converting those buffs into poisons. So everybody has their strengths. A bleed immune fight, Nick Fury ain't going to be that good. A fight where they are, um, everybody has their different strengths. Like shock immune, well, guess what? Doom loses some value. So everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. And people will kind of manipulate to fight their arguments. But bottom line, the game is subjective. People always ask who's the best, who's the worst. I don't believe in that. The game is subjective. That's why I'm not a big fan of tier lists. Many people have asked me to make tier lists. I'll never do that. I believe it's just so subjective based on content and trying to master what all 180 or whatever champs in every single part for their best content and synergies and different masteries and different synergies. Come on. There's a lot to it. So some champs are going to be better at some content and have their weaknesses. Bottom line, how it's going to work. So now Havoc. So this is going to be obviously a tricky one. And I have no issue with taking some plasma damage here because I do know on the next fight, and I will show you, you're going to see me take a good amount of damage in this fight from those detonations. I'm okay with that. As long as my voodoo doesn't die and I solo this fight, I'm fine because I will recover health in the upcoming fights. So, big thing is, I am going to try to get his power under control to help with the plasma detonations. And once I'm able to do that, it's going to make things a little bit easier on me as I've already lost a good amount of damage and he's only at 85%. Or lost a good amount of health. So now I've got it under control. I went ahead and going in, getting the poison damage. I do make a bad decision in this fight. I should have launched another S2 to keep his power controlled, but kept going with the S1s trying to get this fight quicker. And that decision could hurt me a little bit as we see his power starting to go up. So launching a second S2 would have been the smart play because now that he's gaining power, we'll see I'm at 64%, 65%, 66, but unfortunately I just went down to 33 because of a bad decision I made. He's gaining power, and now he's at 2, and I go from 38, 39 to 4%. So a second S2 would end up, but I still soloed, but that's okay. I'm going into the next fight with 4%. 4%, okay? Down to 2. Now, guess what? I'll still take some parry and block damage. I don't care. My regeneration's going up. Hawkeye, easy fight, easy fight. Going to get his power under control. With that S2. So now I don't want to take the good. Now, I can melt him away. I'm already in the 20s. So a little bit of block damage ain't going to hurt. As now I'm just going to stack poisons, staying close. and melt him off. And I did a bad timing there. I accidentally pushed to an S2 as I was trying to build up the Furies. There wasn't really a need for an S2. That's going to cost me a little bit of additional block damage. Like I said, these fights aren't perfect, nor do they have to be, because Doctor Voodoo is that good on these fights. So now I got my S1 and got the 20 poisons. Watching the health just kind of melt off. And I will stick with the S1 as I finish this fight. And bump that 20 up to 27. And okay, there we go. So we saw I started this fight with 4 health because of a bad decision I made in Havoc fight. Ending it at 14, not great, but now I'm going into this next fight, Howard the Duck, with 14. See myself going on up right there. Not worried again. The forgiving nature, one of the things that does give Doctor Voodoo some amazing ability, because he's going to save you a lot of health pots, unlike that Doctor Doom, for example, of some of the others. And no, I'm into the 40%, which is nice. So now I'm in a nice comfort zone. I don't got to pay too much attention to my health now. So a little bit of sloppiness, a little bit of mistakes is not going to hurt me too much, unlike some of the other champs. One of the things though about staying close and building up those Furies too high is going to take higher level block damage, but we'll convert them. And like we've seen, I get the nice little regeneration boost each fight. We're at 29 poisons. Just let them melt on off now. And boom. So watch these red numbers. Alright, Juggernaut. Be a little more careful on him because of this unstoppable. And there is going to be an unstoppable path in this EQ2, which from my perspective was the most annoying, at least using a Doctor Voodoo. However, got to be a little careful because I got to keep a little distance, especially if unstoppable times, or in this case, the specials. Because if I gotta be careful or worry about the unstoppables, I gotta break away space, and that slows down my building up of the Furies. So you'll see I'm playing a little bit different with an unstoppable goes, and you're going to see plenty of unstoppable fights coming up in some of the upcoming fights. However, once I got his power under control for Juggernaut, it makes it pretty simple. Got that power under control. People always talk about best power controller. I'm not saying Dr. Voodoo is the best. Depends on how you use him, but still I'm not saying he's the best. But he is a forgotten, amazing power controller. By now you should see how well he helps me dominate these fights, starting off with power control. And big thing is sometimes remembering to refresh that S2 every once in a while, every couple of rotations can be good. But if I know the fight's not going to be too bad, I won't sweat it too much. Moving on to fight 15 now on Groot. So now this is a whole different path. Like I said, there's going to be several different paths on this video. Now it's the unstoppable, so I got to be careful because there's a little timer up there, so I have to be able to break away to avoid them getting unstoppable and to avoid hitting into or doing a special during that. You have to be very careful with Doctor Voodoo with that timer because his specials take a little bit. They're multi-hit specials, and they take a bit. So if you start a special too close to the timer of unstoppable, it's going to get blocked partway through, and you might get punished. So again, Doctor Voodoo is amazing for these fights in this path. As we're seeing, I'm already at 26 poisons on Groot. But it's a matter of just being careful that unstoppable to avoid too many. I always make some mistakes on these unstoppable timers. But we see a lot of health melting off right there. We saw close to about 10,000 a second for a little bit, over 5,000 per tick. And being careful again. One thing that makes these unstoppable a little more annoying is I have to time my entire fight around it between when I'm doing my special, then I have to break away, which slows down building up my Furies, which slows down how many poisons I'm getting, but I still ended the fight with 27 stacked poisons, which, yeah, I don't think we can complain about. That's pretty dang good overall. Okay, got a little lag going on this one, and going into the Carnage now. Again, cannot forget, these fights are health pools of anywhere between 2 to 300,000. Got a little battery there. And moving on forward, guess I shouldn't be playing with the little battery, but that's okay. See, some good damage with these prowess. Even at 3, those special damage started coming off pretty nice. So with these unstoppable nodes, I have the same basic strategy I've had in all the other fights, with the main exception as I'm trying to be super careful with my timing and backing off when unstoppable hits. I don't so much care as getting unstoppable myself. In fact, I don't really like fighting that much with unstoppable. It throws off my parry, especially when I'm trying to stay close. But I don't want them to be unstoppable, or more so, I don't want to get caught up in the moment and be finishing up a combo or a special while the unstoppable shifts and have it get hit into immediately thereafter. And see the time in there, and barely got that one on the time, and that was a little close for comfort because that could have backfired. But again, a couple backfired mistakes aren't the end of the world with Doctor Voodoo, as we have seen in several of the fights. Don't gotta be 100% clean 100% of the time with him. Moving into Star Lord now. Same basic thing. Play pretty aggressive, stay nice and close, not trying to make too silly mistakes. There's no point in backing up and worrying too much about intercepting all that. I want to stay close. That fancy play style can backfire here because I'm not going to build up those theories as fast, and therefore not going to get the poisons as fast. And again, nothing there on with some chip damage and Doctor Voodoo. He recovers it. Great sustainability. See how I'm hitting into the block there? Means I want to stay close. The longer I stay close, the more those theories go up. So I try to do whatever to stay close, with the exception of that unstoppable timer. Then I want to back as far away as I can. So with the power under control, I focus on the S1s. Most of the fights are over before he starts gaining too much power towards the worry. So usually after one S2, I focus straight on S1s. There are a couple times it would be beneficial to have done a second S2. A good example was a Havoc fight specifically. That would have saved me a lot of health on that fight had I launched a second S2. However, was still successful, so not too big of a deal. Moving on now to our fight 18. I got the Black Widow here. Again, we still got this unstoppable node going on. So again, want to make sure that we are careful with that. Hitting the block, trying to get those Furies up. Do that nice S2. Again, you'll see the same basic things. The reason why I did so many fights, I don't want people saying he only works for certain fights on there. I said at the beginning, there are certain fights he is not the best fit for in 3.1, but there is no one champ that works perfect for every fight. That's why you have diverse teams. So I made a mistake there. Took a few hits for I don't know what I did there. Now I made a mistake with the unstoppable. I got to the block. Lucky that did not backfire too much. Nice damage with those prowess going on. Another mistake. I'm making some silly mistakes in this fight. Again, thank you for the forgiving nature of Doctor Voodoo that I won't sweat it too much. Don't gotta be flawless to make pretty simple work of these fights. And watching that unstoppable as I try to get this last fight down. And that 1% lingered for a little bit, but got her down. Moving on to fight number 19 now. Going to go to Claire. And she does have the poison immunity. Thankfully, the uh, the AI is not smart enough to notice switch over against Doctor Voodoo, nor is it likely the AI is going to get a 5-hit combo ending with the light on me. So Doctor Voodoo should be fine. And although got those bleeds going on, I got willpower active, so getting healing off of that, which is nice. And now it's time to do what I do since she does not have. She starts off bleed immune, has not switched. I can just do what Dr. Voodoo does. The good thing now is we are on a different path and no longer have to worry what I consider that very annoying unstoppable node. I'm not a big fan of that one. Depends on who I'm using. If I'm using the Captain IW or something, I ain't tripping. But it was a little bit annoying with Dr. Voodoo having to time my fights exactly around that. On this path I'm doing getting these couple fights between Claire and Rogue. This path I would definitely recommend bringing a Doom or a Claire along on this path because there were a lot of poison immunes on this one specific path, which is why I did it last. And I did use Dr. Voodoo for a couple of fights on this path. Unlike on the other paths, I used him for almost every fight. This one I kind of rotated between him and Doom, but like I said, I'm showcasing Dr. Voodoo here. Therefore, I'm showing what he does so well in these fights. Mistake there, hitting into the block. Got a little bit of poison, not a whole ton, but enough to should be finishing this fight off. Just be careful with that S1 and get this fight down. Now we're going to be going into one of the minis. We saw the Cosmic Ghost Rider earlier, and we're going to see the Blade. Blade shouldn't be any expected complications. Same basic strategy here. With him, I find his S1 a bit easier than the S2 or the rapid gunfire, although I do mess up the timing on this projectile. Often took a little bit of block damage there, but again, with the regeneration we are getting on Doctor Voodoo, that is a small issue. Once I get his power controlled, then I am good to go, and there's that S2 on the even count. If you like what you have seen with this Doctor Voodoo, trying to figure out what I'm doing or why I'm doing certain things, this is not a tutorial, but I do have a 4-minute tutorial on Doctor Voodoo. I have explained certain things. Not everything I have explained on this video. Kind of highlight to show how good he is for cheesing this EQ. You want to know more about him? I do have a 4-minute tutorial, part of my 4-minute tutorial series I have on many champs. I would highly recommend watching that, as it will help you quite a bit learn this somewhat forgotten champ, which I don't believe he deserves to be forgotten anywhere near as much as some of the older champs. Haven't got the poisons too high, but you don't need to as much. Just speeds it up a little bit, and there he goes. And now the final fight in this little batch, fight number 22, is going to be the boss fight. Wanted to show you the boss fight last. So, by this time, I fought Scarlett Witch a couple times. Found that her it's a pretty straightforward fight. The big thing for me is I like to bait the S1 because the S1 is very easy to bait, little risk, and go from there. I honestly haven't paid much attention trying to figure out Scarlet Witch, and I realize I don't really need to as long as I get her power under control. If she's got power, do the S1, bait that easily. Same thing, get the power control and then do a bunch of S1s, and I should be fine. As far as her abilities and all that, I haven't even really barely looked at her abilities on what she does or what. Which sometimes more complicated boss fights might have to, but in this case, do have to watch out for that unblockable. So it is easy for that. I'm not 100% sure where that unblockable even comes up. Didn't dig that deep into this fight. All I do know is I am watching for it to come up and then try to be careful. She has all those different random things and timers. Timers always make me a little nervous. I don't never know what's popping up, especially as I'm gaining familiarity with the new champ. Haven't fought her enough to be that familiar. But we see fighting her with pretty much an extremely similar, if not identical, strategy as all the other fights, which is being very effective. Big thing is watch out for that unblockable right there. And when I'm worried about the unblockables, you will see I get a little more cautious. And they've popped up a few times. So we'll see down to under 25% now, which is awesome. Go launch the next S2 as I saw her gain the power. Fight's almost over as we're seeing it's going to be all the signs of a nice clean solo as we saw so many. Well, this will be the 22nd solo we saw just on 3.1 cavalier difficulty, and that should be the nail in the coffin most likely as the poisons will tick her down. Hope you enjoy. Don't forget to click subscribe. Don't forget to watch my live stream giveaway coming up in a couple weeks. Thanks so much.